So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to another edition of Renew Education. And today we're specifically having our COP29 debrief. And while we're waiting for other people to join, I'll make a little presentation just to tell us about COP and what to expect. And then I'll give it over to our speakers to continue. And yeah, this is the special edition on COP29 debrief. And just to give us a little idea of what COP is about, especially for those maybe that are hearing for the first time, or maybe you've heard it, but not sure what it's all about. So what is COP? COP is the supreme decision-making body of the convention, and all states and the world are called parties to the convention, and they are represented at the COP, at which they review the implementation of the convention and any other legal instrument that the COP adopts, and take decisions necessary to promote the effective implementation of the convention, including institutional and administrative arrangements. And then to put it simply, COP is where the world comes together to agree on ways to address the climate crisis, such as limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, helping vulnerable communities adapt to the effects of climate change, and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. And so the first COP was held in Berlin, Germany in March 1995. And not today necessarily, last month, the 29th it's an edition because it's an annual event. So the 29th conference, COP29, took place in Baku, Azerbaijan, from 11th to 22nd November. And so at COP, we have two major areas. So the first, I just created the slides to just give an idea of what happens at COP. So we have the green zone, and then we have the blue zone. And in each of these zones, we'll just delve into that. But basically, all together in the zones, you would have negotiations, you have pavilions representing different countries, and then you have like industry exhibition. And more on the green zone. The green zone is where all of the official sections, meetings, side events, and press conferences are taking place. And it also convenes the formal conference and negotiation space managed by the United Nations Climate Change. And then only party delegations, head of state, admitted observers, and the accredited press can enter the blue zone. And for the green zone, beyond the official UN organized part of the conference, COP is also a platform to showcase solutions and pathways from the global community and civil society. So the green zone is managed by the COP's host country and is a space for everyone. So basically youth representatives, artists, businesses, regional, local decision makers, and many other civil society actors. They come together to discuss, present, and exchange ideas and solutions for a net zero future in a more like informal setting. So you have forms of presentations, you have like hangout sports, then you have like podium discussions, poster sections, and exhibitions. And so that is just a little bit from my side, and we would really go into the discussion now by inviting our first speaker, who is the person of Mr. Samuel Okori. And I'll just tell you a little bit about him, and he's going to go ahead to tell us more about himself and introduce to us his engagements that were at COP. Okay, just a little bit, and he'll go right into the section. Sorry, I have a bit to control of my system. Okay, yes, now I have it. And so our first speaker for today is Mr. Samuel Okore. He's an environment and development practitioner. He is the research coordinator of the LDYC, which is the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition Research Working Group. And over the past 6 years, Sam has been involved in the loss and damage agenda, contributing to the development of demands, policy briefs, case studies, reports, expert opinions, interventions, and press conferences that aim at holding polluters accountable for the climate injustice they are causing in the global south. He currently serves as one of the advisory board members of the UNFCCC Santiago Network on Loss and Damage, representing children and youth globally. So please, with a warm round of emojis, let's make welcome Mr. Sam for his presentation. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Sam.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from. My name is Samuel Okore, and today I will focus more on the loss and damage engagement at COP, since that is more like what I followed intentionally at COP. And just like Sandra rightly, introduced before we started about the UNFCCC process, I wanted to do that, but then since she has done that, and she did justice to that on a brief, so I'll just go into loss and damage at COP. But then before I go into loss and damage, I would also like us to know something, which definitely is how loss and damage came about. I know I have barely 10-15 minutes for this, so I'll try as much as I can to wrap it up. So from the past 3 decades, which is over 30 years now, the loss and damage has been not really a strong topic in the UNFCCC, but then it has been a topic of interest in the UNFCCC, which led to the establishment of the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage in 2013 at COP15. And that was held in Warsaw, Poland, and that established the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage. After that, there has been lots of engagement and discussion on how countries can be able to address climate change-induced disasters that are beyond adaptation and mitigation efforts. So loss and damage is those climate change incidences that are beyond adaptation and mitigation efforts. For instance, when flood happens and it kills someone, someone's life gets lost. There is nothing like adaptation in that regard. There is nothing like mitigation because a life just got lost. And loss and damage is, quantified in a lot of ways. So we have reversible and irreversible, economic, non-economic, replaceable and non-replaceable losses and damages. And when you're looking at the context of loss and damage, when you're coming from research perspective, you understand that most countries that are particularly vulnerable to this climate change in these disasters are SEEDs, which is small island developing states. We have LDCs, which is these developed countries, and we have developing countries in general, which is in global south. But in developing countries in general, you have to examine the vulnerability, sensitivity, and impact level of climate change in the disasters in these communities or in these countries. And that will be able to give you a grasp of what and how countries are facing climate change issues. Like, for instance, in Africa, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, they are regarded as the most vulnerable region in the world. In Asia, Bangladesh is regarded as the most vulnerable country in Asia. So you can imagine what that means for a country to be the most vulnerable in a particular continent. And you can imagine what that means for a region to be the most vulnerable in a particular continent. And we also have the Latin America, we have like the Caribbean and all that. So all these regions are particularly or mostly vulnerable to climate change in these disasters. Now, at COP, moving to Warsaw International Mechanism then led to the establishment of the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage, which happened in COP25 in Madrid. And that particular COP, due to the series of engagement that has been happening from the Warsaw ESCOM brought in the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage to fast track most of the works of the Warsaw International Mechanism. And the Santiago Network is aimed at catalyzing technical assistance, of OBNEs, which is organizations, bodies, experts, networks and all that, to avert, minimize, and address climate change induced loss and damage, impacting particularly vulnerable communities. That is what the Santiago Network looks into. And then beyond just that, we have also seen reasons why the Santiago Network has been very, very important in the areas of addressing climate change induced loss and damage, which is definitely by technical assistance. I know lots of people will be like, since Santiago Network was formed, you keep on hearing the word technical assistance, TA. You keep on hearing the word OBNEs, which is organizations, bodies, network, and experts. So technical assistance is nothing short than capacity building, knowledge-based assistance, which has to do with empowerment of your capacity, closing knowledge gap, research, data-driven decision-making, empowerment, early warning and any signals and all that. And this is what technical assistance is all about, and not the other way around, because the other way around, people look at it like, okay, we fund on-ground infrastructural projects. Santiago Network is not a fund, but a network that catalyzes. By catalyzing, it means it mobilizes assistance for countries, knowledge-based assistance for countries in averting, minimizing, and addressing climate change into loss and damage. And when loss and damage happens to communities, communities don't adapt. That's why I say it is beyond adaptation and mitigation efforts. So what communities do when loss and damage happen, or when climate change indeed disaster happens, is communities try to cope with that incident. That is why Santiago Network 2, we also try to understand the coping mechanism and coping measures of communities, and how these coping measures can be strengthened in minimizing the impact of climate change in this loss and damage. So moving on to COP25 to COP26, which led to the full adoption of the Santiago Network that brought in the board. Then moving on to COP27, which led to the establishment of the Loss and Damage Fund, which currently is known as the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. COP27 was very, very monumental, because we know what happened, the back and forth of bringing in the loss and damage agenda, especially the fund, as most countries in the global north are not really interested in establishment of the fund for loss and damage fund, as the name goes then. And in COP28 in Dubai, it brought in the operationalization, not the full operationalization, the operationalization of the Santiago Network and the operationalization of the fund, of the loss and damage fund, which happened in the first day at COP28 rather. And in COP29 led to the full operationalization. The full operationalization means these organizations, these mechanisms, these bodies can now start working actively. People can send in requests. People can send in, people can send in membership requests. People can send in technical assistance requests. People can send in funding requests. For the Santiago Network, its full operation has already started, with Vanuatu being the first country that will be supporting in catalyzing technical assistance responding to loss and damage. As a youth in a Santiago Network advisory board, it's very, very important that we seek for youth inclusion in the areas of catalyzing technical assistance and addressing loss and damage, and how that youth inclusion can be much more effective in the way that active participation is actually encouraged and not passive participation. So I've talked about full operation of the networks. From COP28 to COP29, over $700 million has been realized by the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. In the last COP, we saw, which is COP29, we saw donations pledges from Australia, which is about $50 million. We saw pledges from Sweden, which is about $80 million. And we also saw pledges from Luxembourg to the Santiago Network. And we are still also expecting more pledges from other countries in support of these mechanisms in responding to climate change in these loss and damage. And one beautiful thing about this is that the Santiago Network is free and open. Please let me know how many minutes I have, so I don't overshoot. How many minutes do I have, please?
About 10 minutes remaining.
10 minutes remaining. Okay, good. I still have time. So the beautiful thing about the Santiago Network is that the Santiago Network is is one of the most flexible mechanisms of the UNFCCC. What I mean flexible is that it's very, very inclusive, that you as an expert, you can be a member of the Santiago Network. You as a youth group, you can be a member of the Santiago Network. And even you as a community, you can be a member of Santiago Network. And the Santiago Network seeks to look into best practices, case studies, research, data, and how all these can be able to help in mobilizing assistance for countries in strengthening their ability to address climate change issues. So I just need to emphasize that we don't help countries adapt to climate change. We only help countries, we only strengthen their coping mechanism. Because in adaptation, that's why we have the adaptation fund, which only looks into the adaptation efforts, where we have the transformation adaptation system, locally led adaptation, country-driven, national adaptation plans, So adaptation looks into adaptation. However, there has been some imbalance somewhere when it comes to climate change and adaptation in the areas of preparedness. Preparedness should focus more into loss and damage efforts, but then preparedness is focused into adaptation. And this is like a topic for another day. It's not a topic I want to dive into right now because it's very, very broad. So at COP, another thing that was very, very important at COP was we had meetings of WASO, ESCOM, and meeting of the board. So the board signed a finalized MOU, which is transfer of secretariats to full operationalization of the board. We also have meetings of the Santiago Network where they gave the reports about loss and damage, and then which contains the annual report of the Santiago Network that looks into the 3 major meetings held by the Santiago Network, and it also looks into the budget of the Santiago Network and the work plan of the Santiago Network for 2025. So right now, application is open for organizations, for countries, for communities to start either applying for membership or applying for technical assistance. But you have to make sure that the technical assistance being applied by countries or being applied by communities should reflect the climate action plan of their country, of your country, of the community. It should not be anything different. It has to reflect the climate action plan of your country. Else, then there will be discrepancy between your request and that of the country. And then beyond just, okay, so the WIMP also looks into the product material, the knowledge product materials they are trying to establish, which definitely is very, very important. And part of those products includes knowledge sharing, strengthening engagement, and enhancing action and support for communities. And this was published as a technical guide and knowledge exchange products to improve global understanding of loss and damage impact. So these were products that were shared by the way. However, parties raised concern on the need for countries to start developing annual reports on loss and damage to be able to determine the level of climate change disease loss and damage impacting each country. And this will be able to determine the level of funding, the level of technical assistance, and the scope of funding and technical assistance that should be given or addressed to countries. And then in general overview, the COP was a little bit intense and a little bit good. However, countries like small seeds highlighted financial and technical support needed in addressing climate change loss and damage. And we also saw in the closing plenary where countries expressed their dissatisfaction about first the NCQG, which only made provision of $300 million instead of 500 that was, as a result of negotiations, they arrived at 500, and those 500 they were expecting that would be the actual amount that would be, that would be contributed to the NCQG goal, which is a new financial mechanism. However, in this context too, the loss and damage was not included in the NCQG, which definitely, if it was included, it would have been very, very good in supporting countries much more, as well as measuring the impact and understanding the level of impact of climate change in these loss and damage in countries. So that was not included. And it's also important to know that some agenda items, especially loss and damage, we are all moved to WIM. We all moved to SB, which definitely will be coming up in May, June next year. So there were some agenda items that were very, very inconclusive, especially loss and damage was very, very inconclusive. However, there was a win on adaptation mitigation based on the fund pledge, and then there was also a win on global adaptation goal. There was a win on energy transition. There was a win on, carbon credit or carbon market. So I think they made progress. And in general overview, I would like to say that the COP is good when it comes to so NCQG means New Collective Quantified Goals. So it's NCQG, small s, and loss and damage. So I don't know if I still have time because I am very, very particular not to go into where I don't want to go into, because it's going to take us the whole time to start explaining these things. And I don't know if I have how many minutes?
4 minutes.
So I can't do that. And I don't know if there's anybody that is going to talk about that. Else, I will talk about that later. But let me just focus on loss and damage aspects and some areas of COP. So at COP too, like I say, the energy gained momentum, transition gained momentum, and in conclusion, I would like to say that there is a need for countries to start building their negotiation team, because what I saw that played out at COP is less preparedness of negotiators from global south and more preparedness of negotiators from global north. And when those things happen, there is always imbalance whereby you are static to be dynamic. What do I mean by that? You don't want to change, you don't want to move, you are just where you are because you have already prepared your mind, you've already have a preconceived outcome, and that is what happens. Negotiations doesn't, when you have preconceived, I am a negotiator here, I am a mediator here in the US, and part of what we do in mediation and the negotiation is you come with an open mind, right? And go with the flow, because that will help you direct your angle and put your arsenals in a particular place. So I feel there is need to empower more negotiators from Global South. There is also need for more capacity building training, and then there is need for more understanding on negotiation process and policy, because that is very, very important. When we understand negotiation process, looking from the climax to the resolution, how this process flows, the flow of all these processes will help in good negotiation process. Because even in the Santiago Network, we do a lot of negotiation, but then what wins in negotiation is lobbying. Your ability to lobby effectively and lobby convincingly helps the whole process easy. So what negotiators need are, what is my gain and what is your gain? How does this benefit me and how does this benefit you? Once you are able to get that cracked out, like for the Santiago Network, for instance, I'm going to end with this. For the Santiago Network, for instance, they wanted to make it like the board for responding to loss and damage, the fund for responding to loss and damage, which only looks into country-driven mechanism in responding to loss and damage. But as a youth in the board, I said that won't be possible because you are not being inclusive here. At the end of the day, you're going to leave communities out. So instead of we saying we are practicing bottom-top approach, what you are doing right now is top-bottom approach, because it's going to be from the government down to the people instead of from the people to the government. So they asked me, okay, I drafted a test, which they all rejected, to say, no, we don't want community-driven point of entry. They say they don't want to have 2 points of entry. They don't want to have community and they don't want to have country. They don't want to have country. They don't want to have community, but they want to have country. And I said, okay, how about we do it this way? That community, that people, or that regions can be able to submit technical assistance, which include national, regional, and local level. People at the national, regional, and local level can be able to submit requests for technical assistance, thereby making everything more inclusive. And they say that you draft a test on that. And I drafted the test, and the test was embedded. And what this test simply means, everybody can submit technical assistance. It doesn't have to be country-driven. However, it has to reflect the climate action plan of the country in addressing climate change. Thank you so much.
Wow, you're exactly on time. Thank you so much for that. And I wanted to plead with you, if you still have a couple of minutes, maybe towards the end, to maybe respond to other questions that the audience would have. But I would introduce our next speaker so that we can just go around and hear from everybody. And if you have a question, please, introduce yourself in the chat box and just share your question with us. And thank you once more, Mr. Sam. I was thinking I would see much more emojis because he just made a statement about submitting a draft that was embedded in the text. And I believe that is critical to show how he like directly what his inputs are, both as a negotiator at the Santiago Network and even as a youth representative, being able to bring up our voice realistically. And we can see how young people are really participating in driving climate action. And so while we are still putting up the emojis, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. She's going to be talking more on the climate finance side. So the question around NCQG, all of that, please prepare them for Sarah. It's my pleasure to welcome Sarah. Sarah is a researcher at the American University of Beirut Nature Conservation Center, specializing in climate resiliency. She previously served as a UN volunteer, working with the Lebanese Ministry of Environment and UNDP on a comparative climate policy assignment. Currently, Sarah is a youth fellow with the Climate Vulnerable Forum and a negotiator on the Lebanese delegation at COP29, focusing on climate finance. And she was also selected as an international youth climate delegate by the COP28 presidency. I would let Sarah to tell us more about what she has, about her background, and as well as share with us what she has for us today. So over to you, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for actually the invitation to join you today, and it's my pleasure. So I'm just gonna start. So what I'm gonna do actually is just tell you the outcomes of the negotiations on NCQG and the whole experience, how it went. So first, when it comes for what is NCQG and why it was basically this COP recognized as the finance COP, is because after 2009, basically, and with the Paris Agreement, they started to work on the 100 billion USD for climate finance. And when it comes to seeing if it was achieved or not, there are reports such as the one by OECD that tells that the $100 billion was achieved. And then you have other reports which are more from the global south, such as Oxfam, that are saying no, it was not achieved. And from our perspective, from the global south, we do say it was not achieved. But like basically this is still a dilemma, and even in the text for this year's negotiations, it wasn't included because no one agrees, and you don't have actually the methodologies and a clear definition of what counts under climate finance and what does not. But after the 100 billion USD target, they needed to start something new, and that's how they came up with the new collective quantified goal. And before going to COP, the expectations for the developing countries was to push for basically it was to push for more than 1 trillion USD, which contains 500 billion that are from developed countries directly as public funding. However, with everything that was ongoing there, first it started that there was no alignment, no consensus between developing countries and developed countries. And the tension in the room was that the developed countries were looking more on the quality of the finance, rather the developing countries were more pushing for the $1.3 trillion. And this is a number that was agreed by the G77 plus China, which is a negotiation groups for developing countries. So it all started chaotic, I would say. There was like no consensus. And then slowly the co-chairs of the negotiations were like, you know what, we're gonna have all options in the text. So this is what happened. We had like a very long text, which was around, if I'm not mistaken, like 30 pages. And then it was reduced to 23 pages, but still this is a lot. And it went to the ministerial level. And that's when they did the trade-offs. And I would say, unfortunately, the outcome of NCQG was not what the developing countries were expecting. It ended up with the $300 billion for public funding. It's correct that we had the 1.3, but if you look for the 300 billion, it's too low. And don't get what you say, don't believe everything you see on social media, and especially how the COP presidency will market their outcomes. It's not that they tripled the 100 billion, because if you look at the year and the timeline, it is still 2035. Therefore, if you account for the inflation and all the economic crisis we will have till 2035, I think we're still like within the 100 billion we initially had. So this is something to keep in mind. Other than that, I would just move on the 7 key elements of the NCQG. So we had the quantity, which we talked about, the quantum. We also had the contributors. So do we want only to have public funding or also private? And from the outcomes from this year, we had a lot of private investments, and the developed countries were pushing for that. And they were saying that, you know, developing countries don't have the enabling environment. So our money will go to build this enabling environment, and then it's up to the developing countries to have this private finance and also the South-South cooperation. However, if you go back to the Paris Agreement, it basically states that developed countries should finance those stuff, and it's not developing countries helping each other. So this is something also to keep in mind. Moreover, for the private investment, I'm with private investment. I do believe we need it. However, you should keep in mind that legally they're not gonna how we say it, they are not bound by international climate agreements, the private sector. So no one will come after them actually, you know, are they really contributing for that or not? Also, for the time frame, as I said, it was agreed to be for 2035. Developing countries were pushing for 2030. Also for the covered teams, and I saw that there was like a question, basically a difference between NCQG and loss and damage. So what I want to say is NCQG is more like an umbrella. It's like because I have to say it, but like it's basically when it comes to climate finance, it's somehow like we have so many wallets and they are empty. So what they did with the NCQG is just like putting all of those under one umbrella, and they were pushing for having the 3 main pillars, which are mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. Loss and damage was included under NCQG, but I should be very honest with you, the language on that was super weak. Samima, maybe you can reflect on that more. And also when it comes to the finance, it was more pushing for the mitigation, and adaptation was still not very clearly, like the scope of adaptation project was not clearly reflected on. And yeah, in terms of the quality of the finance, and I think this is where it's very important for developing countries, there was a lot of mentioning of the multilateral development banks, and they do have some shortcomings. I think we all know them. And it's basically that we often get the money through concessional loans. And as developing countries, we should push for as loans. So as developing countries, we should push for the highly concessional loans, which means that the interest rates are low, and they are keeping in mind that they are like flexible and accessible instruments for everyone. Because at the end, if you're a country that has a lot of conflicts, let's say, or problems with the IMF, then would you actually access this money? And also, the program I was in, which is with the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which is an intergovernmental group that advocates for just climate policies, was pushing that this money basically goes to local or regional institutions rather than ones that are in the global north, and that's how we're going to access the money. And yeah, and finally, it's the transparency. So how can we report back on the finance? And I would say, because I just want to clarify one thing. Under climate finance, like as a team in the negotiations, you'd have different agenda items. One of them is, for example, NCQG. The other is loss and damage. You also have, for example, the green environmental facility, Jeff. You also have the Green Climate Fund. You also have one on the Standing Committee on Finance. And I just want to elaborate on the Standing Committee of Finance. It's basically the one that is responsible on putting the definitions and the standards for climate finance. But if we're lacking on the technical and we don't have a clear definition of how we're gonna account for climate finance, then I think it's a super complicated problem in the long term in terms of reporting. So yeah, and also one thing is just like to tell you why this is super low. If you look at all the submitted nationally determined contributions, the adaptation plans submitted by the countries, if you really want to achieve them, it should be like around $5 trillion to implement them. And then you're ending up with the 300 billion. So that's why don't believe everything you see on the social media, and do really reflect and do your analysis. And if they tell you like there's no money, so I'm just gonna give you two statistics. So basically there's an average of $7 trillion of fossil fuel subsidies every year. And also we have like $2.5 trillion money going to wars. So basically there is money, but it's just if this money is going to the right place or not. So I think now I will move more on the experience rather than the outcome. So I just want to say that being in those rooms is not a very nice a very nice experience. Okay, so I just saw in that shot. Yeah, exactly. So I just want to say, because you have a lot of power dynamics, and you have to keep in mind, so for example, if you're a country in Africa, you're gonna be part of the African group, and then you're gonna be part of the G7, 7 plus China, and some countries in Africa also part of the least developed countries, so LDC. So you do have a lot of negotiation groups, and it's hard to have them all aligned together. Especially, for example, in climate finance, I think when it comes to G7, there was SIDS, LMD SIDS, and AOSIS, which really quantified how much they need for climate finance, for those two groups. And then they had like a very different, maybe a total number than other countries like G7, and then they compromised between each other to have the 1.3. So I just want to tell you that even within the G7, it's really important to have this consensus, and there's a lot of power dynamics. And then also, like when it comes to the negotiations, sometimes you do have the negotiations for the track you're in, but also you have other meetings which are for the negotiation groups. So that's why sometimes it's overwhelming, because you have a lot of meetings to attend. And now I just want to say how you can be part of that. So basically, and actually I just want to ask one question. How much time do I still have?
You have till 10:03, so let's say 17 minutes.
Oh, okay. I think I'm gonna be done before that, but okay.
Yeah, I would leave it for people to reflect, because I see a lot of people that attended COP but didn't stay till the end, so they would like to say something also.
Perfect. Okay. So just like from my experience, so basically, if you're someone interested in being like a negotiator for your country, I would say just at the beginning, maybe it's sometimes hard to directly reach out to someone at the local level and to get like basically some support. But like what happened for me is that I just like applied to international opportunities, I got in, and that's at the international level I connected with my government. So this is a strategy that you can do. So when they see you like at the international level and you're doing like a good job, they would be interested to take you like the next year. And it's also very important to pitch yourself and let them know what's your added value. So for example, make sure you're highlighting your expertise. If you have like a sectoral knowledge, highlight that, and also follow the negotiation tracks that is aligned within your expertise, and also offer some services. So sometimes maybe they just need someone in the room taking notes, so offer those services, but for you to be and to learn from those rooms. So basically during my first year, I just like asked one senior negotiator if I can shadow him, and this what happened. I learned a lot from him, especially how to balance between the power dynamics. And the next year I was like the only negotiator from my country on climate finance. So just to tell you, it just like pitch yourself, connect with people, and I think being like at COP, it's the best place to connect with people and build your network, both at the international but also at the local level. And the most important thing for me is when you go back after those conferences is to give back and to cascade the knowledge that you gain to other people. So yeah, I'm done. But I would love to know if you have any questions maybe towards the end.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. I know Sarah has a little bit time. Before we introduce Mr. Lukman, who is already on the call, I wanted to give an opportunity to one person to really ask anything at all when it comes to related to climate finance. But I'll just start the question with this. You said something about G7 77 saying putting the metric to $1.3 trillion needed for. I don't know, how did they come up with that value? And what really happened that from 1.3 we went to 500, then went to 300. So I keep seeing these figures, and then in the published text, like what you see on the COP29 presidency's website on the outcomes, you see Baku target 1.3 trillion, and then with a substantial 300 billion, and it's like two amounts are there and trying to confuse us all. So I wanted clarity on that.
Perfect. Okay, so I have to say first, for how the G77 basically quantified it, came up with this number. It wasn't agreed upon at the beginning. Like some countries within the G77 were pushing for 1 trillion, some other were pushing for I think 1.7, and then some were pushing for 1.3. And that's where I go back to the point that you need to have consensus between the countries. So they had a consensus to go for the 1.3, and it is because you had countries such as that are under the negotiation groups of the SIDS and AOSIS that were quantifying their needs. This is not something that all groups did. However, those two groups were actually quantified, and then they had a consensus and they went for the 1.3. And I have to say that the 1.3 is the total climate finance, which includes the public funding and the private investment and other instruments. So the 300 billion, it's basically only the public funding. And what I mean by that, it's basically the money coming from developed countries directly to developing countries. So basically in the text, we're gonna see those two numbers, the 1.3 and the 300 billion. So what the 1.3 is the total amount, and it includes South-South cooperation. So for example, within developing countries, you do have countries that are emerging markets. So countries that are doing much better than others, so they should support each other. That's how they are saying it, but I don't agree with it. And you also have the private sector. So basically within the same country, the private sector to mobilize this type of finance, and the multilateral development banks, etc. And even the multilateral developing banks are considered under the 300, I should say that. You know, so that's why don't get fooled by the 1.3 trillion being there. The one that the money mobilized from developed countries to developing, it's 300. And that's where at the end of COP, I don't know if you saw like the civil society, the protest, everyone was like, no agreement, no deal is better than a bad deal. But like and also like before having the 300, I'm not sure if you followed really how it went, like the process. The number was 250, so they raised it by 50 billion exactly. And just a final comment on the 500. So 500, it was what the developing countries were pushing. So basically, instead of the 300 to have 500, but obviously it didn't work out.
Okay, that's much better. I saw Enoch's hand, or was the question similar to what I asked already?
Yeah, the question was similar, how the figures have come about. Or maybe just there is that new fund, the New Collective, I think, Quantified Goals, I don't know, something like that. How is it different from the loss and damage? Do they operate independently, or is it because the loss and damage fund has failed? That's why they're bringing in this other type of fund. Perhaps some clarity on that.
Yeah, so I just have to say, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of wallets in climate finance. So there's the loss and damage fund, there's the adaptation fund, and those fall under NCQG. So how I see the New Collective Quantified Goal is just like a big umbrella where all those funds will go under it. But the loss and damage fund, Samuel, maybe you're more expert on that. But it's just like if you are facing, and they have like a specific list of what is considered as loss and damage. But as a country, when you're faced with the impacts of climate change, then this is somehow to repair this damage or to, you know, give you money from the damage you had. For example, cultural heritage, if I'm not mistaken, is under it. I'm not sure also if early disaster management is also under it. But yeah, basically loss and damage is very specific. Just like if a country is facing impacts from climate change, then you pay for them. NCQG, with the New Collective Quantified Goal, is the total amount of climate finance at the international level that should basically go to developing countries. And as I mentioned before, I know this is a little bit, I would say, tricky, but even for now, we don't really know if basically loss and damage is under NCQG or not. In that text, it was mentioned, but you know, it's still
Great.
yeah, it's not that clear.
I completely understand that. I will take Mr. Nuruddin and then we go on to Mr. Lukman. I'll introduce our third speaker.
Okay, thank you, Shalom. Good day, Sarah. So I just want to get clarity on, the difference between the, official development assistance of some country. Some country, many develop the global north country has an official development assistance plan, for the developing country. So I want to understand the relationship between the ODA, the official development assistance, with the climate finance. So is it the climate finance, is it that, the finance come from the ODA plan, from the official development assistance, or there's another budget, entirely for the climate finance, from the global north country?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I'm answer it from my own experience and my own perception. But basically, this is also like a point that there was like no agreement on if climate finance it's basically the funding that is going to climate finance, it's within ODA or not. And it goes back to the point that you don't have methodologies and like I would say like principles of what counts under climate finance and what's not. So there are reports that says that that basically under the $100 billion, there was like ODA included, you know, before we're talking about NCQG, like the 100 billion, what falls under it was ODA, like the money that went to the developing countries. And also there was like another statistics that says that only 6% actually came as actual finance, climate finance, and the rest was basically, I mean, like in grants, and the rest was in loans for the 100 billion. So for the NCQG, it's the same story. We still don't have clear definitions if this is coming through, it's included in ODA or not. But definitely something developing countries were pushing for. And I think if you saw the quote of the UN Secretary General is that climate finance is not aid. So it should be in grants, but it's not aid. But yeah, this is also like a very good point, especially that it goes back to the point that maybe some of the climate finance we're gonna be getting is in the form of loans. And developing countries obviously are pushing for grants, but also highly concessional loans. And by highly concessional, I mean ones that have like low interest rate and that do keep in mind the cost of capital, but also the inflation rates at the local level, basically the currency.
Yeah. That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. Please bear with us to stay a little bit towards the end. Mr. Lukman will just make his presentation right away, and we'll take more questions and more discussions after Mr. Lukman. So permit me to introduce Lukman Akintola. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, Mr. Lukman. I'll just give you a little bit introduction about him, and he's going to go on to tell us more about himself and his contributions to COP29. So Mr. Lukman is a researcher also and a public policy advisor with over 7 years experience of working at the intersection of climate change, human security, migration, and inclusive governance. He holds a bachelor's in degree in international relations from Obafemi Awolowo University, Nigeria, and a master's degree in politics and international relations from Peking University, Beijing. Over the years, Lukman has conducted a series of policy-focused research and implemented project activities across several countries in Africa, including Nigeria, Mali, and Ethiopia. Lukman currently serves as the knowledge advisor at the UN Global Center for Climate Mobility, where he is supporting the Africa Climate Mobility Initiative, which serves as a deep dive project in West Africa, Egypt, Botswana, and Somalia. I will leave it here, and Mr. Lukman will take the floor. Thank you so much for joining us, and my sincere apologies for intruding on your very busy day.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you.
Thank you. Apologies. I'm on the road. I had to just stay somewhere to get this with. So my sincere apologies. I'm also in the continent, so it's a good time, very good weather. So thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. I want to say thank you, Shalom, again for this excellent initiative. This is an ecosystem that I always love to be a part of, where we share ideas and we also kind of share exchange on knowledge issues around climate issues. So this is very interesting for me. Thank you to you and also to your team. Ideally, I would say that, like Shalom rightly said, I work at the intersection of climate change and human mobility. By human mobility, we mean forced displacement, we mean migration, but also planned relocation, depends on the context. So, and also our work and my work specifically also go along the line of climate immobility. That is, people that are either trapped or unwilling to leave their current location because of climate crisis. That being said, we also, I work with the Global Center for Climate Mobility, where I work as the knowledge advisor. With my work, I currently work at the African Climate Mobility Initiative, on the African Climate Mobility Initiative, but at the GCCM, we also work in the Caribbean, which we call the Greater Caribbean Climate Mobility Initiative. And we also work in the Pacific, which we call the Rising Nation Initiative, meaning that we work across 3 regions. So, and because of that, our work, we work with basically across 3 streamlines of work as well. Work on knowledge, which is research, working around knowledge production on climate mobility issues. Thirdly, and secondly, we also work around policy formulation, that is working directly with policymakers on the ground. While on the third part, we work around localizing effort on the ground. That means supporting young people, supporting young people that work on the ground, either through knowledge, technical support, and at times it could be funding. And what exactly did we do at COP? So at COP, we work with our major goal at COP is to provide an ecosystem for, or let's say a hub, where we have a wide range of players, ranging from government, from CSOs, from gender group, from youth group, indigenous population, to come together to advance conversations around climate mobility. And while we advance this conversation, but also to create a platform where we can exchange ideas and knowledge, but more importantly, also bring together actions. And as Shalom can testify to this, it was a platform at the pavilion where we bring together all these stakeholders to sign agreements, to come together to advance policy work, and a whole lot of initiatives that goes around. So the pavilion, the Climate Mobility Pavilion at COP29 was largely a platform for us to bring together all these players across different contexts to have conversation that is important to advance climate mobility. And we all agree that climate change is not just a crisis that is one person focused. It cuts across different players, youth groups, and we believe that we can do that alone. And that's why one of the work we do beyond knowledge, beyond policy, we try to also drive policy conversation and also diplomacy around it. Because as you all know, previous speakers have talked about the negotiations. We have talked about the climate finance. But at the heart of this thing is a diplomatic work around it. Because it also means that you need to massage egos. You need to speak to policymakers at the top level. So, and this is extremely important. It's extremely important, not just because it's always the right thing, but because the diplomatic effort is important to advance climate finance. Because as much as the NCQGs, the loss and damage conversation, the adaptation funding, these things are extremely important, but nothing would actually happen if this diplomatic work did not come out. So we prioritize a lot of diplomatic work. And how do we do this? Especially at the UN level, we work with the UN General Assembly, especially the presidency of the UN General Assembly, so that we can use that to engage with a lot of member states. And we do that a lot in New York. And also, we also know about, for instance, at the level of UNFCCC, we also engage a lot of member states to ensure that we can at least advance not just the knowledge, but also the policy issues around it. You understand? So I think that is very important. Another thing that we also do beyond our policy work is the youth group. That is extremely important. And personally, for me, it's important to me. And it's important to me not just because young people are vulnerable groups, but also they are major agents in advancing climate adaptation issues, not just on the continent, but also across several parts of the world. And how do we do that? We have, for instance, the ACMI Youth Forum, where we have an ecosystem of young people where we come together to have this conversation. We also push policy documents, we write books, just one, to advance knowledge. Secondly, to ensure that we build the knowledge of young people to be able to discuss the right issues. As a young person, if you really want to do what is right around pushing, say you want to push the right advocacy work on the ground, especially for policymakers that still find climate issues a bit alien. You will be surprised if you meet a lot of policymakers at the country level that some people still not believe in climate crisis. So because of that, we believe that it is important to build the right knowledge. So one of the work we do at the ACMI Youth Forum is to advance that knowledge. And this is also one thing we are doing right now. Having this conversation alone is knowledge sharing. And I think it's important if we really want to do as advocates, as researchers, as major players in this space. So I think that knowledge sharing is very important. But another thing we also try to do is we bring young people to global platform. And a good example are the delegate, which Shalom is a part of. So we try to do that to take young people to those platforms, COP, also the UN General Assembly. We take young people to UN General Assembly as well. And for instance, we now already have the Climate Mobility Summit. It happens every September. So we try as much as possible to ensure that young people can exploit these platforms to advance not just their own personal agenda along the line of their own efforts, but also collective efforts of the African continent, also your home country. So we find that that's very important. But the third part is also supporting what they are doing on the ground, because while we work from top to bottom, we also try to see bottom-up approach, which, for instance, you have an initiative on the ground. We try to support young people through funding and technical support. And how do we support that? For instance, around our work we currently at COP29, we launched the Community Climate Adaptation Facility. It's the funding that's for young people, but not only for young people, but also for community-led adaptation work, so that we can support in our own little way to support those efforts. We know that those big funding, for instance, 300 billion of NCQG, of SCQG, and of those things are important. But for us, we believe that those processes take time. And for most of you that are aware of how this climate finance works, you know that it takes a lot of processes, a lot of negotiations. And we feel that the climate impact is not waiting. It keeps going on. Everybody is facing it. So we think that these quick grants can help community to cushion or to be resilient a little bit to the effect of climate crisis. So these are some of the things we do. And at COP29, these are the ideas we try to push. And I will just make one more point before I drop it off. One of the work we do in the continent is to work, we call it the Climate Mobility Deep Dive. And the deep dive means that we focus on each country because we already have a continental outlook. Then we try to look at it at the national level. I currently work in Egypt, I currently work in Somalia, and I currently work in Botswana. And these three countries, and of course, the West Africa as a region. So we try to look at this work at that national level, one, by localizing the knowledge, the continental knowledge. Secondly, by advancing a climate mobility blueprint, which is like a policy blueprint. And the last one, we try to help countries to develop climate mobility policies. So these are the three major objectives of the climate mobility deep dive. And overall, it has been success. We are still finalizing in a couple of countries like Uganda. I'm not particularly involved in that. They are almost at the third phase of that. So it means that there is a lot of work to be done. So as young people, we can't at this point not do anything. So, but I always say that at every opportunity I get, number one thing for young people is to build knowledge on climate crisis, especially our contextual knowledge. As much as you want to know all the UNFCCC terms, it's okay. But we need to understand what it means to your own country, what it means to your community. It is that way you can do the right advocacy work. It is the right way you can actually push the right agenda. So I think that knowledge sharing is important. And there is a book that we launched last year. It is called the Climate Mobility Guidebook for African Youth and Children. I enjoin everyone to go download it and read. And what that means that for everyone, irrespective of a background, either you are from political science, either you are an engineer, you have a role to play in the climate crisis, in the climate work. So everybody can pick a career alongside of it. For instance, our friend Shalom, with what she's doing, but she's got an NGO that is doing something around renewable work. And that itself is an effort. So I urge all of us, one, to build the right knowledge and to find our niche in the space. It is that way we can do the right thing and we can meaningfully address some of these issues, at least from our own expertise. I will drop it here, but I want to say thank you again to Shalom for inviting me. And I apologize. I'm on the road, so I'm just speaking from a car. So I'm sincerely sorry about that. But please, thank you again. Let's keep working together. I'm happy to jump on any questions or anything that comes forth. But thank you again, Shalom, and thank you to your team. Over.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lukman. You just emphasized on things that are very critical. And I have to say thank you once again to the GCCM for the opportunity to be live at COP. It was transformational for me. And like he rightly said, they give young people opportunities, not just to be at these global conferences, but also to be able to accelerate their own youth-driven efforts. So thank you. I just wanted to say thank you again and then open the floor to anyone that has questions. I mean, everyone can basically unmute at this point. And okay, before we get to that, please, can we just turn on our cameras for a second? I want us to take a group photo, a family photo for COP29 debrief. So if you're closer, okay, yeah, his email address. I think someone is asking for your email address, Mr. Lukman. I don't know if that is okay to share, but if you have further questions, please, put up your hands if you can and turn on your cameras if you are in a comfortable place. Let us just take a quick photo and then we can go on with the discussion. I'm not seeing any cameras coming on. I just want us to take a quick photo and I mean, we can always turn off our cameras once again. Thank you. Thank you. Please, can we turn on our cameras just for a quick picture? I promise it's not going to take too long. Especially for our speakers. Sarah, are you still there? Mr. Samuel, Mr. Lukman, just one picture, please, with every one of us. And you can always turn it
I'm
back off.
sorry, I just was grabbing something. I'm back.
I'm so sorry to disturb Mr. Lukman.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And so I'll go ahead to take this picture right away. Smile, 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, I've gotten the pictures. Thank you so much. Good to see everyone's faces. And now, I mean, our speakers, please feel free to answer any questions you see on the chat box. But if anyone wants to raise their hands to say something, please go ahead. I saw one question from Pira, and Pira was opportunity to be at COP29 as well. And I think, Pira, you can start with your question and just then, go into any experiences that you wanted to share.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity to be here and speak and even listen everyone's experiences. I really adored the way you have shared your ideas related to the COP because this is my first time I had been at COP. Even I meet with Shalom as well. We had a conversation over there about renewables and even the other COP the topics as well. My question is actually about as I have witnessed the many African countries and the people were too active at COP because it is not about the issues of Africa, but it is all the people or the countries are affected by the climate issues. Even I can talk about my region, Asian countries, or even my countries. I'm belong to the Pakistan, and every year we are facing the same issue. Even in the last month October, we have around a 48 centigrade temperature. It was not like it is not a usual thing because in every year we are facing a drastic changes in temperature or even the heaviest rainfalls. But my question is that I haven't seen the Asian people are not as much as active. Might be our government, maybe, but Asian people were not as much as active. It might be the opportunity they couldn't get at the international platform. They couldn't, like, I am the one that I got an opportunity to speak, and whether the women and the climate or even the youth empowerment at the UNFCCC platforms. So this is the one that I'm saying because this is the only one within a 1 year we have only one platform, or the UNFCCC COP29. So whole year we are preparing for this. My actually question is that how we have to encourage youth that they can more involve in such platforms, or more they can raise their voices. It is always not about the Asian or the African or European countries. It is always about the climate issues. It is regardless of the gender, regardless of the age, regardless of everything, they are affecting everyone. Because I'm witnessing, I'm belong to my village where in 2020, 2 years back in 2022, what happened, the complete the villages has been washed out. But how is you all are experienced, so I just wanted to know how the youth can involve more into such issues, so they can tell those people that they do not know what happened due to the climate issues and the environmental issues.
That's a very critical question, and I think I would let our speakers, any one of you, if you feel free to take on the question. So she's specifically asking for the Asian region, how can young people be encouraged to participate more in this space? You know, even beyond COP29, how can they engage more Asian people? Is it by creating opportunities? She just wants to get an idea. Pira is from Pakistan, and she's very passionate about empowering her people.
I would love to start, and then maybe someone can add on me. But basically, I just want to say, so I'm also from Asia, but like from West Asia, like the Arab countries. But I totally resonate with what you said in terms of the representation. And I think it's a matter of funding. That's one. So basically, if funding is coming to those countries to basically to have youth representative going to those conferences, but also the second thing, it's capacity building. And this goes both from the international funding, but also at the local level, if you do have organizations that are working on that. A personal recommendation would be just try and do some stakeholder mapping in your country, in Pakistan, who are the key players, whether they are international organizations or local NGOs that are working on climate. If I'm not mistaken, I think in Pakistan you do have I think I'm not sure which organization, but it's the one with the animal. One sec, I'm gonna like while after I talk, I'm gonna send it in the chat. But basically, you do have one international organization that is working a lot in your country. So I would say just like connect with those people, also connect with people from your ministry, and try to advocate for a youth council. Try to also uh, link yourself with NGOs and maybe try to work with them as a consultant. Maybe you can pitch such projects on having like climate education, climate justice curriculums that are developed and making them accessible for young people. But other than that, I would say on a personal level, what you can do is look for international opportunities. There are like a lot of websites available, and just put yourself in those places. And once you're there, maybe it's going to be easier for you to connect with the right people, and then to bring the knowledge that you have to the local level. So personally, what I do is I work, for example, with UNICEF in my country, and that's how I volunteer, and I help other people my age at the local level. So I would say this is what you can do, just like to connect with one organization, and hopefully this will make things easier.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was beautiful. I don't know if someone wants to add on that.
Yes, I would, and we'll be stepping out very soon because I have something to catch up with. So just so Pira, I want to like say you're on the right track, and first having that passion is being on the right track, and that thing is keeping the passion alive, right? That is what you really need right now. So like Sarah rightly said, identifying with local NGOs. I'll use local NGOs. Okay, don't go for the big NGOs yet. Look for grassroots organization. Look for people within your community. Look for youth that are doing something, look for organizations that are doing something. And if there is none, then you can start with advocacy. So you start with advocacy, try to use social media or use one-on-one advocacy, like reaching out to people one-on-one to talk about climate change or to talk about impact, and try to also leverage on schools, right? So that is how you can be able to empower yourself locally, and also read up content like articles, publications on climate change impact that is related to Pakistan. Okay. And from there, I think the next thing is you may also decide to volunteer remotely for organizations that doesn't, based in Pakistan. Just in case you can't find one, you can also look at remote volunteerism with organizations, link up with them, and start doing something in Pakistan for them. Because what organizations want to see work is how they can be able to expand their reach beyond their current location. Yeah, I think your hand is up. Go on.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving all the ideas that I am really thankful for giving an another kind of thinking that I should start from today. I will hopefully I will do this, and till the next COP or the other in global events, I hope I can represent my people and my country and even Asian countries as well. Actually, my question is that these all are the thing I'm actually already doing, because like I'm part of one of my provisional government department, being an environmental chemist. Since last year, I'm actively working to giving sessions, webinars, whether on online like remote sessions or even on the physical as well. In the last 1 year, I tried or contact every department in Pakistan, but I couldn't got a positive response for this. So in the end, I'm not saying that I'm completely hopeless, but I have still hope. Might be in next year I'll got the opportunity, but I'm looking forward for the international organization, international people. Due to this, I have meet Shalom as well. So this is due to this reason I'm part of the renewable technology. So I'm not sure. Might be I'll got opportunity in my country as well. So I'm looking to see the opportunities in another countries, because we all are working on the same issues. So if anyone have the opportunity, or even the Shalom or everyone, you all are there. So even the other international organization, I approached them, but I couldn't get a response from them. All the time I got an email like, unfortunately, you can try next year. Unfortunately, this is the same answer I'm
Okay, can I say
getting a
something?
response. Yeah. Okay,
So
okay, please.
I can link you up. I don't know if you know ICAD. ICAD is based in Bangladesh, and I know Bangladesh has some connection with Pakistan, India, Nepal. I think with Bangladesh, I think there's a kind of common form of boundary, but ICAD is focused on. Let me share their link with you here. I know their director, and I've done stuff with them. This year, I organized a workshop in Malawi, and that was in collaboration with them. But they are, hold on.
Yeah, exactly. If you have, can you please share your email? Even I can send my CV as well. You can see the work I have done. Even I have my publications. Even I have, like Dawn News. There's international newspaper. I'm writing the articles. Even I have the publications, which is around impact factor is 14.5 impact factor. Even I have attended this time COP, but due to completely fine, I funded myself. And
So that is
even
ICAD.
okay.
You check this website out. Um, and this is my email. But check this website out and read up about it. You send me an email. I will connect you with ICAD team. But when you send me the email, send me the email with clear specifics of what you want. Okay? Don't
Yeah,
just send
exactly.
random email. Just send clear specifics. This is ICAD. This is how I think. This is intersection. this is how I think I can be of assistance to ICAD, or this is how I want ICAD to be in Pakistan. This is what's happening in Pakistan, and through ICAD, with what they're doing, I feel there is intersection where I can strike in a balance. So that is it. Okay, so I have to go now. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank you so much. Thank you for helping out. Thank you. Once again, thank you to Shalom, Sarah, and you as well.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Mrs. Campbell. Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you so much. So Priya, we can always talk about how to go on from here so that you just have a very clear, specific demand to Mr. Summer. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And I will just allow, like, it's completely free to leave, but I wanted to just say a presentation on renewable watts technologies and some of the activities and what we did at COP. I just wanted to be a part of the recordings that we have for this section. So thank you so much, Sarah. And if you have like a very busy schedule, I completely understand, but thank you so much for the section. I'll let you know once we upload this particular debrief on our YouTube channel. I'll share the link with you. And please, if you have any notes or anything you would like to share with the audience, we usually send messages after the sections like this, like giving them summaries or like reports or anything that you think that they should look out for, please share with me and I will share it with everybody on the call. So thank you once more again, Sarah. And please have a great day. And if you still want to join us, I mean, it's still okay, still fine.
You.
Yes, thank you so much. And so like this section is more on the energy tracks of the communications that were at COP. I decided to add a bit of energy, and then at the last part, you would see more on decisions on things like, okay, water or the truce appeal and things like that. And so one of the things that got me intrigued at the COP29 were these pledges, the pledges on the Global Energy Storage and Grids Pledge, which is to deploy 1,500 gigawatts of energy storage by 2030, refurbish grids globally by 2030, and then by 65 kilometers by 2040. And I think if this is really implemented, especially to us in Nigeria, I think that will be helpful because I know that there are several times someone will see that we'll keep hearing, oh, the grid has collapsed and things like that. So this is a great pledge, and about, I think 50 countries signed this, and this is available on the COP29 website. And something else that was also intriguing was the Green Energy Zones and Corridors Pledge, which really focuses on driving commitment to green energy zones and corridors. What it basically means, like driving economic growth and investment towards our shared vision, fostering regional cooperations, and expanding on infrastructure and promoting climate finance. But we know that the whole text around climate finance, like we have rightly heard from Sarah and all the negotiators that joined us today, you know that there has been some gaps in the financing, but at least for the private sector, especially the companies and industries that were represented at COP, you will still see them like ramping up finance in terms of green energy, like deployments, tripling renewables or facilitating renewable energy projects. So I'm still hopeful that these things can be accomplished. And then there was this particular declaration on hydrogen and also a declaration on reducing methane from organic waste. There was also another one on nuclear energy. A lot of countries are now deciding to set up small modular reactors to power their grids and also to ramp up renewable energy deployments. And so I think that is also revolution now. I remember that one of the Renew Education sections that we had, when we had Dr. Challen speak to us about nuclear reactors and how safe it was. I think that it's also critical to accelerate nuclear energy technologies, although we know all of the safety and security and health impact. But as long as they can get it right with the technological development, I think it's a game changer for the industry. And also, when you look at AI, we know that the discussions around artificial intelligence consuming a lot of energy, using nuclear reactors to power that and not relying on grids will be also another beautiful innovation. And I think that's something that some countries are already looking at. I think not countries, but some companies are already looking to use I think Google also, it's already looking to build nuclear reactors for their AI systems. So there was also a declaration on children, youth, and climate action. This was particularly facilitated by UNICEF and the Youth Climate Champion. There was a declaration on water, and for the first time, we actually had like water part as a part of the conversations at COP. And then there was a truth appeal, which I think is very critical. And like Sarah mentioned about the funding that goes to wars, if we are able to agree to live in peace and harmony, I think more of the funds that we send out to wars will be redirected to a better purpose. Then declaration on enhanced tourism. And generally, there were so many things that Renew What did at COP, and I was privileged to represent the organization. So the first was sharing about how we started, which was really from the IACT training, the inspiration from the curriculums that I developed. So share that with the audience, including the Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency. And then the next picture was the launch of our Renew Initiatives report. If you don't have access to that, please send me an email. We would give you access to that. Feel free to read about our milestones and our plans for 2025, which includes having Renew Education again. So we'll be having monthly Renew Education sections, and next year will be very interesting. I promise you. I promise you. I've already started sending out the invitations to speakers, and we've had confirmations for very reputable and distinguished institutions. So get ready to get your mind blown on Renew Education next year. And then on the right, we had interesting engagement with WISER, where we shared about climate financing and innovative financial mechanisms for much more smaller enterprises. So community-based projects, grassroots organizations like Renew What, drawing from our experiences and sharing that with the audience. And then sponsored by GCCM, we were able to stand on the podium to make demands for Nigeria. And that is also part of the things that we do at Renew What. We also have an arm where we focus on climate mobility. And so this year, we were able to provide funds to 10 households that lost their properties and a lot of their living due to the flood in Borno, in Maiduguri, that's in Nigeria. So this was something that we shared to the audience, and I was really grateful for the opportunity to share that with everybody. And yes, we got an invitation to share the demands with a climate reporting agency. And once that is live, we'll share the link to everybody. And so, yes, we are still making efforts to keep us amplifying our voices to institutions that are taking decisions on climate action. And then again, we really talked with young people. The last picture you have there is the one with UNIDO, where we specifically highlighted women-led businesses and energy access. These are more pictures from different sections that I engaged in, more on the official event for the United Nations framework, CCC. So part of the side event was to talk on green upskilling, and we were able to represent Renew What and Student Energy at the conversation. Then for Gaio, mostly that was the picture on the left bottom. The picture there, what we spoke about was really about all of the achievements of Renewat and how we've fostered partnerships with collaborations and our partners, and speaking about how we've been able to drive impact to people at the grassroots level, impacting 5,000 people, and sharing how we think more young people can be a part of climate action. And so that was the opportunity. We had the floor with the Green Africa Youth Organization. I know we all know about them. They received close to $1 million funding recently for their one of their projects, clean air particularly. And so it was a great opportunity to share what we do with them and also talk about collaborations. And we also had the opportunity to have a bilateral with the US Secretary of Energy. This is Deputy Secretary. And what we majorly talked about was, international partnerships. However, there are a lot of principles and, processes that comes with this, but we're just hopeful that these conversations can unfold more. Also given that I'm privileged to be here in the United States. And we went on to join some of the protests, not really protests per se, but like peaceful rallies and demands saying that just transition should be considered for those at the grassroots level, and every decision has to be just, and it has to be equitable, and we need to amplify a transparent system when it comes to climate finance for the global south. And yeah, all eyes now on COP30 Belém 2025. And please feel free to keep being in touch with us. I know that Pierre had already mentioned, like, we talking about collaborations and what we can really take forward from COP29 to COP30. We are hopeful that we are hopeful to also engage at COP30, and feel free to reach out to us if you have ideas on collaborations or any specific projects that you want us to ideate and brainstorm on. We are very open to collaborations with local organizations and international partners. And with this, we have come to the end of Renew Education, the COP29 debrief. And thank you so much once again for joining us and staying to the end of the presentation. It's my pleasure to officially close 2024 and say a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to everyone that is on the call. Thank you so much for being with us from January up till now. I know it must have been a whirlwind of learning, unlearning, capacity building, networking with different organizations that have been represented here at Renew Education. Well, thank you so much for joining us and giving us this opportunity, your time and your patience with us. So thank you so much for being a part of our journey and being a part of our story. And with this, we've come to the end, and I just wanted to say thank you and look forward to our emails for 2025. Thank you once again, and goodbye. Have a great Saturday. Have a great weekend and a lovely festive holiday period. Thank you so much, and bye. See you in 2025. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much, Adelmi. Merry Christmas in advance too. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you so much, Ilestami. Thank you so much, Renewat. I mean, it's all Renewat. It's mostly Renewat's team here. So thank you so much, Anita. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you so much, Nelson. Thanks so much, Jonathan. Thank you so much for always being here with us. And we look forward to working more next year. So bye.